Filmspotting is presented by Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the show description and use code FILMSPOT25, that's FILMSPOT25, to receive your discount.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Well, look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting, celebrating our 20th year. I'm Adam Kempenaar.
And I'm Josh Larson.
On the island we're headed to, 24 species have survived there alone.
The theme park owners did experimental work, leaving only the worst ones here.
The Jurassic Park franchise takes Scarlett Johansson and us to the island of misfit dinosaurs for its latest installment, Jurassic World Rebirth. We've got a review, plus the killer doll sequel, M3GAN 2.0.
Yes, it's me. What a shock, etc.
Really good movie. We'll also have a sacred fossil review of the dino flick that started it all, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. That and more.
Hold on to your butts.
Ahead on Filmspotting.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Welcome to Filmspotting, a sacred cow review. 2 decades, well, maybe 65 million years and 2 decades in the making, Josh. I hope it's not the cow that gets fed to the velociraptor in Jurassic Park.
If that happens, we will be in deep trouble with a certain segment of our listenership. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we have been triggering 90s kids since the very earliest days of the show, not giving Jurassic Park enough love. I think one of us may be in trouble. Later in the show, we will have that sacred cow review of Spielberg's, 13th to 18th best film. Somewhere in there.
Well, I'd have to check my rankings, but let's go with that for now.
Along, Josh, with your recommendations of M3GAN 2.0 and the new Sorry Baby out in limited release, plus Massacre Theatre and more. But first, Jurassic World Rebirth. If, like us, you maybe lost track of where we are in the Jurassic franchise, the rebirth in the title is a clue. It's the 7th film in the franchise, but the first following the 2022 conclusion of the Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard-led Jurassic World trilogy. Rebirth may also be a nod to the return of David Koepp, the screenwriter of 1993's series starter, Jurassic Park, which we'll get to.
The new film welcomes new stars to the franchise, namely Scarlett Johansson, along with Wicked breakout Jonathan Bailey, and there's a new director as well, Gareth Edwards. Edwards has a decent track record when it comes to franchises. He made 2014's Godzilla and 2016's Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Just previous to this movie was an original, the AI versus humans war film, The Creator. So, what is Jurassic World Rebirth about? Dinosaurs, kind of weird ones. Here's a clip.
Mr. Work here didn't tell us everything that we need to know.
Look, this island was a laboratory of sorts. They conducted experimental work here.
What kind of experiments?
Crossbreeding of species, engineered entertainments, they call them.
Genetically altered freaks?
Any that were malformed or just too damn hard for anybody to look at, they left them here.
I just came from seeing Jurassic World Rebirth, so we're going to jump right in. And I think I've got a decent place to start. This could be a short review. According to Filmspotting PA Sophie Kempenaar, the only question we have to answer is, how hot is Jonathan Bailey?
I'm going to say not wicked hot, but pretty hot.
I think that's fair, but still nerdy hot. If you're into Jonathan Bailey, you might be into Jurassic World Rebirth. We will build off that or try to go into a bit of a different direction. A Rotten Tomatoes blurb caught my eye from movie mom Nell Minnow's fresh review. She gave Rebirth a B grade, saying, "It's what we came for. Dinosaurs chasing and eating people. And just to mix it up a bit, some people chasing dinosaurs. A sprinkle of humor, a touch of warmth, a very brief detour into morality, but mostly the aforementioned chasing." You're a certified Jurassic completist, Josh. I am not. I've only seen 4 of the 7. And the only one I like is the original, which, as folks will hear in a bit, I certainly don't love. So you're the right guy to pose this to. What do you come to a Jurassic movie for? And did Rebirth deliver?
Oof. You don't come in with very high expectations. At least I don't. To your point, I recently forced myself to become a completist and watch Jurassic World Dominion, and I added it to the pile of negative reviews of Jurassic movies I have given. Of the 6 previously released films, Adam, I gave a positive review to Jurassic Park. Of course I did. The original. And I gave a slightly positive 2.5 out of 4 stars review to Jurassic Park 3. The others, you'd probably have to pile themselves on top of each other to get to 4 stars. I am giving a 3rd positive review to a Jurassic movie with Jurassic World Rebirth. I'm going to go further than that, Adam, and say this is the best Jurassic movie since Jurassic Park.
The original.
Parentheses, but hardly any of them have been any good.
Right. Okay.
Are you with me?
I am not with you, though. And I do want to point out, because I mentioned this last week, that I had said that we were both going to make time for Dominion. You did, as you just noted. I did not. I was too busy. Sure, there was also an overwhelming lack of interest, but also when I said I've only seen 4 out of 7, I did realize that not only did I need to watch Dominion, I hadn't seen The Lost World or Jurassic Park 3, and those watches weren't happening. So what was I going to accomplish if I finally watched Dominion?
Suffering. You would have accomplished suffering.
Suffering. Based on my ratings and looking at my notes for Jurassic World and Fallen Kingdom, I feel comfortable saying that Rebirth is better than those two, though for what it's worth. I did check this, not to get too caught up in the tomato meter here, Josh, but Jurassic World is the 2nd highest rated on Rotten Tomatoes, 72%. It's even higher than The Lost World, which I think is maybe 59%. I didn't have a bad time with Rebirth. David Koepp is the screenwriter here, like he was with the original. Gareth Edwards, they're both solid craftsmen. And for as unnecessarily bloated as the plot maybe felt to me, it hums along pretty well. And you do have Jonathan Bailey and Scarlett Johansson and Mahershala Ali. They're all solid, of course, as is Manuel Garcia Rolfo, who I like a lot from The Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix, a show I'd call a guilty pleasure, except I still don't believe in guilty pleasures. And Rupert Friend is good, too, even if he's just playing the Paul Reiser role from Aliens. And even though he's never playing the villain, I don't certainly think he's ever overplaying the role. There's still never a second where you doubt that he's anything but truly awful.
Sure.
I should also note that in many ways, Jurassic World Rebirth is surprisingly playing the role of James Cameron's Aliens. Did you notice, especially at the end, the dinosaurs take on the form of xenomorphs?
Oh, yeah.
Xenomorphs. Yeah. They really look like them.
Our friend Wendy Fox Weber, she went with me to the screening, and she pointed that out right from the big still they had plastered on the screen before it started. She's like, we're going alien here, apparently. So
it's there, right? There is also a legitimately awesome action moment and an individual shot and subsequent shots that I'm sure that we'll get to. That said, I'm surprised my issues weren't also issues for you. So maybe I'll throw it back to you and say, for a movie called Rebirth, did you feel like this movie was a rebirth? Did you feel like this movie was untethered from the Jurassic Park, or at least the Jurassic umbilical cord?
I think it was untethered far more than I expected it ever could be, given what we've seen previously with this franchise. Of course, there are connections. It's rooted right in that opening, the cold open, where it's, I think 17 years ago, and they're doing experiments, I believe, It's related to the original park. So yeah, this is not like a complete standalone. This isn't like Prey to go to the Predator series, right?
Right.
But I think it's closer to the recent Godzilla and Kong films. And as we've mentioned, Gareth Edwards did the earlier Godzilla. I think it's closer to those than it is to the Jurassic movies. Now, those I've been, I think, mixed to mildly positive on. I'm not saying they're the gold standard of creature features or monster movies, but I think, Edwards Godzilla in particular have some strong moments, and overall they're good films in this genre. I do think Jurassic World Rebirth is closer to that rather than worrying about being part of the Jurassic legacy. And that's to its credit. I was in on this pretty quickly, Adam, once I realized, I think you said that the plot is a little bloated. This movie is absolutely longer than it needs to be. But honestly, once I realized they had a clear mission for this objective, to get 3 blood samples from 3 different massive dinosaurs all around this one island and then get out, I kind of breathed a sigh of relief and thought, okay, there's going to be no like side missions or conspiracies or supporting characters who pop up later, legacy characters we have to deal with. For a Jurassic movie, I found this to be remarkably streamlined. I'm also just a sucker. Give me an expedition movie to a dangerous spot and with clear objectives and characters that I relatively, find compelling. The way you describe the stars here, totally accurate. They do the job. Johansson, especially, I think, knows how to thread the needle of having enough fun, but not too much fun. So she's distancing herself and her performance from the material and in a sense making fun of it, but also not, I think Brie Larson was in one of the Kong movies, might've been Skull Island, which is interesting, but she's like given 130%. It's like, I'm going to show you I'm really invested in this movie. You don't always need that either. Johansson is right kind of down the middle where she's having just the right level of fun. But you called out, one of the relatively supporting characters, Ruben Delgado, played by Manuel Garcia Rolfo, and he's, the head of this family. His younger daughter, Isabella, played by Audrina Miranda, his teen daughter, Teresa, played by Luna Blaze, and then Teresa's dopey, lazy boyfriend, Xavier, played by David Iacono. So here's something that this movie helped me realize, Adam. The common question with these disaster, monster, creature features is, do we care about the characters? Do we need to care about the characters? Does the screenplay care? And I would say my expectations going in are to meet that bar you described that the stars bring. Committed, interesting, compelling, nice to look at. Okay. There is a higher bar that some movies do meet. And, we'll discuss this in our Jurassic Park Sacred Cow review about the characters there. And I always am asking myself, especially with something like Jurassic Park, why are these characters not registering in the way I really want? The writing is there in Jurassic Park where they're trying to put this parenting theme on top of Dr. Grant. So they've paid attention to it. They're trying to make it work, right? And here's one thing I realized. I don't know how they do it. I don't know if it's the writing or the performances or a magical combination, but for a character in this movie to work ultimately for me, I have to be invested in something about them beyond their immediate escape from the danger on screen. And I got to tell you, Adam, I got, not like emotionally invested to the point that I worried about them and thought about them while I was going to sleep the night after seeing this movie, but I got emotionally invested in the dynamics of this family beyond their danger. This is a dynamic. When we first meet Xavier and their boat, this happens early on, it's not a spoiler, gets swamped by the Massasaurus.
Sure.
Make sure I get the dinos right. He has already proven to be disrespectful and lazy, as I said, and just, one of these boyfriends, you're like, why is this girl with this kid? You want him to get swallowed up. Basically, you figure people are going to die in this movie. Xavier, you're looking like you're the first to go, and I'm okay with that. By the time this movie ended, Adam, I didn't want Xavier to get a scratch on him.
Right.
And that is not so much because of the danger scenes he's placed in or scenarios he's placed in. It's because the dynamic with the father, with Ruben, changes. The dynamic with Teresa is revealed. We start to understand why she is invested in him. And those three gave me something human to be intrigued by that would have been happening even if the dinosaurs weren't around. So high bar, low bar, however you want to describe it, it did help me clarify when these characters work as real humans in these types of movies. And I think that's, I think that's to Rebirth's credit.
Yeah. I want to come back to the care question maybe a little bit later, because I do think this will relate to what you're saying, but to your point, and I agree with that family dynamic, this idea of being invested in something beyond just escaping danger. I think that's a good way to frame it. I think it comes back to the idea of showing and not telling. When the movie shows us character through their actions, through behavior, we believe in them as human beings, in how they relate to each other, their dynamics, then we get invested in them. It's when the movie tries to create an emotional core by telling us all the reasons why we should care about them as human beings that movies struggle. And this one does.
It has a perfect example of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Right? With,
and
are
that's
we thinking of the same
what we're going to
scene
get back to
with Ali and Johansson on the
there's
boat?
Multiple. Yes, there are multiple examples, but there's one key scene. Yes. And I think we're thinking of the same one early in the film, where basically the movie, it lays out its emotional exposition is what it does in that scene.
Trying to fill in their backstories and paralleling them. And it's all, to your point, through dialogue. It doesn't work at all.
It doesn't work.
It's what I think does happen a fair amount in Jurassic Park and happens in a lot of these movies, really. So when I see a significant portion of a film like this finding a way to do it better, I have to, admire the movie for that.
Yeah. You talked about it being streamlined and the objectives, and I get it. There's also the flip side to that, which is sometimes when the movie lays out too neatly what the objectives are, step 1, step 2, step 3, as there are here, then you are, as an audience member, very keenly aware of how much time it's taking to accomplish those objectives. And so it's like, is the movie going to get there? How much time are we going to take here between step 1 and step 2? And there was quite a gap between step 1 and step 2. But to that original question along those lines, Josh, what do you want? Well, for me, it doesn't matter if it's a Jurassic Park movie or could be any movie. It's really the same for me. I want characters and I want stakes. They're related, right? What's my investment? What's your investment really in this film? And I think that's a problem. It was a problem for me. Ultimately, if they complete the mission, if I'm rooting for them to complete the mission, it's evil pharmaceutical guy helps his company make, according to him, trillions of dollars. And let's say I don't care as much about that. Well, then the best case scenario is a mercenary with a heart of gold doesn't have to take dangerous missions anymore. Okay, cool, I guess. That wasn't much for me, Josh.
It depends it depends how much you buy Henry, the Bailey character's alternative of which he suggests early on. Hey, let's take these samples and make this free.
Yes.
We'll what does he say? Crowdsource it. So the pharmaceutical benefits will be available to anyone. Now, do I think that's hokey? But it's
a little hokey.
It's not exactly what I needed to root for, but it does balance out what you're talking about. It does give you a third choice.
Yeah, but also it is introduced late enough into the film that for a while it took me a bit to get invested in the film. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's another thing to add to my list. I can't believe I forgot it. It's another thing to add to my list of ways this movie, I think, isn't completely weighed down by the legacy of the original, but certainly is anchored by it. I'm going to give you a few, right? And why is that one in particular? Because that goes back to the line that is in Jurassic Park, right? That Hammond says, and the lawyer has the funny quip where he says, yeah, we'll have a coupon day or whatever, where the families will come. Hammond says, science shouldn't be just for the elite. It shouldn't just be for the rich. It needs to be for everyone. That's an echo of it here, in that science should be for all. Clearly a callback to the film, right? So the prologue, as you already mentioned, is very similar to Jurassic Park. There's the objects in mirror are closer than they appear nod in the shot where we're introduced to the Rupert Friend character. Also, we're introduced to him through the rearview mirror. I don't think that's by accident. Clearly, David Koepp must be a health food nut, because I'm pretty sure he thinks that all of these dinosaur experiments would actually have been successful if the workers could just stop eating junk food.
I love
a Snickers wrapper. Snickers wrapper plays a prominent role. And there's a brushing of food off a map that directly echoes Sam Jackson's brushing of junk off Nedry's desk in the original. There's, of course, a notable use of flares. I wrote all these down. I caught them all, Josh. A notable use of flares to distract
which is also a Gareth Edwards thing. Like that's a very, probably. Especially in Godzilla, that's sort of a visual motif that I think he uses really effectively.
So when dinosaurs ruled the earth, the banner hanging, the same banner, maybe not the exact same, but it is, for all intents and purposes, hanging in a museum. And I think it's even at that point when we see it in the film, starting to come down.
Yeah,
like
or
it
go
is
up,
at the end
but it's definitely echoing the motion.
Right.
For sure.
There's, of course, a direct mention of Alan Grant. There's a dinosaur eye shot that felt pretty similar to the T-Rex scene. There is, I know we'll get into this, there is a behold the dinosaurs in a field scene that certainly felt similar. There's the decision that we've already talked about to introduce the Delgado family into the mix with the two girls and cut between those two storylines that mirrors the storylines in the first one, where you have Grant with the kids and everyone else. And honestly, none of that Easter egg kind of stuff really bugs me. I don't think it overwhelms. I don't think it overwhelms the movie or anything. And you know, as I said, some of that Delgado stuff, I think, contributes to the bloatedness of the plot, even if I genuinely do like their scenes together and like those characters. But I will be honest, Josh, by the time we got to the end, and maybe, you know, you can just tell me I'm being too cynical here, but this is how I felt. By the time we got to the end, and there's no spoiler here, and the penultimate shot is almost it really is the exact same shot as the one in Jurassic Park, where characters look out the window or look at the water and see birds gliding gracefully along, and we cut back to their content, reverent faces. By that point, it was too much. Homages are one thing. It's another thing to co-opt emotional beats and just copy and paste them in, especially when on the whole, this movie, I think, exudes a fraction of the reverence for the natural world that the original did.
Well, I think this might be a case of, you know, not having seen a couple of those other Jurassic Park movies that I have, because the things you're critiquing, I found to be much worse in those movies.
Maybe. I'm sure they are.
This handles them, to my mind, just a little more delicately, at least in a way that didn't bother me. I would say, to that last point in particular, I think this movie makes space for the Spielbergian wonder much more than the other installments did. We reviewed Jurassic World together, and that one, the thing I held against it the most is the cruelty towards the dinosaurs that it gave us just by killing them, you know, indiscriminately, and that was part of the action. This brings us back to the wonder, whether you find it hokey or lazy. You know, I think it's probably going to be a mileage may vary moment. By that ending, when it echoed the ending of Jurassic Park, I had such a good time that I was willing to forgive that and see it as an echo, not just a lazy echo, but an echo of spirit that the movie had earned for me by that point. So I think it's earned some of those homages. I also think that some of the homages are doing original work here, or at least clever enough work. The Snickers thing, again, because it happens in the cold open, we can talk about in detail. It's not really a spoiler, but I just love how Gareth Edwards uses that visual detail. There's storytelling economy, right? In that it's funny. There's the connection that you mentioned. Sure. Little Easter egg for the people who enjoy that. Not too much where it's distracting, but also it's this signature of the human folly. It's reminding us that this whole series has been about human folly.
You can control for as much as you can control. Something is always going to go wrong.
Because you shouldn't be messing. You shouldn't be messing with this in the first place.
That's it.
And so I thought that was actually a clever way to continue that theme. But yeah, to your point about the homages, though, I think you can go beyond Jurassic Park. What I found, you know, I would say to me, I could take it or leave it. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to be annoyed by it. There are way more Spielberg nods here than Jurassic Park. The Mosasaurus sequence with the sailboat, it's an extended Jaws. I mean, it could be pulled from Jaws, the way that is handled. I found that I found it kind of enjoyable that they decided to say, hey, we're going to lean into the Jawsiness of this.
Yeah.
This one worked less well for me. One of their the creatures they have to track down is one of the flying dinosaurs. So it has a nest in the side of a cliff. And inside the nest is built in like a abandoned temple from an ancient civilization. Indiana Jones is all over that.
It feels like it. You're
that one I was like, okay, come on now. And, you know, the one thing I also did not work for me at all, it's a minor plot detail, but the younger Delgado daughter, a tiny baby dino, you know, finds her and she adopts it. E.T. vibes all over that with the animatronic and that whole thread line I didn't need either. So it was just interesting to me that they weren't just returning to the Jurassic model. They were returning to the Spielberg model in ways that I would say they had a 500 batting average or a 50% success rate on that for me.
Yeah, I think that is very clear that Edwards is trying to tap into that model. And maybe before I counter on the wonder point as well, I'll at least acknowledge that the shot or moment I was alluding to earlier that I think really is amazing. And overall, I agree with you. I think the action scenes, for the most part, the action scenes are rendered very well and are pretty thrilling. There is a shot. I don't think we want to spoil it exactly. I will just say that there is a shot later that makes tremendous use of nighttime and clouds at nighttime and a very large dinosaur. And I suppose a sense of camouflage, and the way that dinosaur emerges is a genuine surprise and a genuine bit of misdirection and awesomeness, a different kind of wonder, but awe.
No, that's a good point.
It really is great. Now, I will have to take your word for it on how the wonder is handled in relation to the other sequels. At least, I don't remember. It's been a while now. The other ones that I have seen. And I know we are going to discuss this more when we talk about Jurassic Park. That's one of the key elements of that film that make it successful. Rebirth eventually tries to summon awe, but when Edwards finally cues the wonder, it's too little too late, or it was for me. And when I say cue the wonder, that's how it felt to me. Not entirely ineffective, but a bit obligatory. And so late in the film, I looked at my watch, it was at least at the 90-minute mark. I think there's a reason why Spielberg, besides it worked for the story, why he put that scene so early in the original film. By the time we get it in this film, Josh, we've almost entirely seen the dinosaurs as threats, as grayish, gross mutations. And this scene, despite how great the score is, again, going back to the original, recalling the original film.
Definitely a lot of that.
Making great use of that and really needing it to do that work. It's not enough to undo that fact or to balance out the fact that we've seen them as threats up until now. And I do believe the Jonathan Bailey character in particular, his sense of wonder in the moment. But here again, something we'll dive into deeper when we talk about Jurassic Park. I do think Edwards miscalculates a bit what produces that sense of wonder for the audience or what the equation is. He makes it mostly about scale, the size of the dinosaurs, their size in relation to the humans, the sweep of the valley, and the several dozen dinosaurs dotting the landscape. You know what we get very little of until late in the scene? Faces. Reactions. The audience's experience, we experience wonder through the characters more so than the camera. And by the time we finally I thought we were going to get it, Josh, and he cuts away almost immediately from Bailey and goes to the dinosaurs. Most of the grandeur, by the time we get to Bailey, most of the grandeur of that scene had passed for me. And so by the time it is about Bailey and his experience, he's a phenomenal actor. I really do believe that. By the time he's shedding a tear, I didn't feel it.
I would say that sequence was serviceable to me. I would put it on the same level as we talked about the stars. They're doing their job. That sequence for me did its job. This is the Titanosaurus herd, I think we can say, which is the second of their 3 dinosaurs that they need to get a blood sample from. Here's maybe why I'm a little more generous towards it. I do think it's nicely set up earlier in the film, and maybe this is why it didn't bother me that it came at the point it did. But the movie begins in New York City, where basically Scarlett Johansson's character is being recruited by Rupert Friend's corporate, the pharmaceutical corporate guy. and they're stuck in traffic at one point because, and I may get my dinosaur wrong here, I think it's a Brachiosaurus, but it has basically wandered into the streets. I did like the setup of this, where at this point in time, dinosaurs have mostly moved towards the equator because they can't survive anywhere else. And people now are just kind of annoyed by them.
Yeah.
Lost interest. So we're in New York City, and this giant beast, which honestly, I thought the effects are well done, that produced a certain amount of awe. This shot of this giant beast on this street in Manhattan. But what do the people in the movie do? They're just honking at it. They're just pissed. It's making them late.
It's disrupting their day.
But it's a nice little precursor of the scale and scope you're talking about, and reminding us of the grandeur of these creatures. There's also a line, and this brings us back to Bailey's Henry, the scientist who goes along. And when Rupert Friend is trying to recruit him, he points out, have you ever seen a dinosaur in the wild? And Henry says, no.
He knows what buttons to push. He's a good villain.
And he says, if you have never done that, you're only like a guy who's been to the zoo. And there's nothing visual about that, but there's character stuff that you're talking about going on there. So when we got to the Titanosaurus scene in the field, I think it worked a little better for me because I was remembering the earlier moment.
No, that's the payoff of
and
that.
You can understand why he's responding how he is. You're right about the attention to scale, because that is the one thing that made Edwards' Godzilla so distinct, is that the movie was all about dwarfing the humans and emphasizing the immensity of Godzilla and those creatures. So maybe he leaned a little too far here, but I think the movie worked well enough. I think that sequence, I should say, worked well enough for evoking this tradition of basically overall, Adam, I thought this movie respected its monsters. And you touched on this about the wonder and the grandeur of the terror scenes too. I thought Rebirth allowed these monsters to have both pathos and terror in a way that was kind of tapping into the Spielbergian wonder thing too.
Yeah, maybe that scene in that moment, the crying in particular, didn't work for me because I was still also hung up on what we were discussing partly earlier. And this also goes back to something in the original Jurassic Park. Most of the movie's attempts at poignancy just fell flat to me. Backstories about dead friends on training missions, missed mothers' funerals, dead children. Like, the more people are having conversations about these things, and actors have to do a lot of heavy lifting with their eyebrows and their eyes, to get us to care about the characters, get us to buy into the stakes of their mission, the less interested I was. It is funny because this is something else that I'm sure we'll want to bring up when we talk about Jurassic Park, how self-aware that movie is or isn't about sort of the question of commerce and its place, right? Creating a blockbuster movie and creating this park that's driven by capitalism. This whole, you reference this, right? This whole mission and this whole concept of this movie is built around the idea that now nobody cares about dinosaurs anymore. And in fact, the mutations were all a byproduct of the fact that no one wanted to go to places like the original Jurassic Park anymore because it wasn't enough just to see the brachiosaur walking around anymore, right? So they had to amp everything up and turn them into freaks to get people to care. And here we are all walking into the summer movie where it's littered with dinosaurs that are a bunch of freaks.
But is it though? See, I suppose one thing I liked about this movie is that it's bookended by that, right?
Yes.
This idea of the genetically experimented on dinosaurs, but the three main targets we encounter, and we also have a T-Rex sequence too. Those are all, original old school dinos. And that's kind of what I liked about it.
If you go in and you're right to that point, if you go in expecting that that's what you're going to get, and let's be clear, there are plenty of dinosaur attacks and dinosaur evasions in this film. But if that's all you think you're going to get, like the first hour of this movie, there's almost no dinosaurs. There's a lot of just setting up of the story and character stuff, or at least plot stuff between the characters, right?
Before they
I'd
even have to clock that. Hour sounds a little. I mean,
40 minutes.
I
40
really
minutes
like
anyway.
the open. The cold open worked well for me. So
Yes,
that
it
carried
did.
me through for a while. But yeah, it takes a little while to get to the real action. I do want to, before we go, just call out one action set piece, because I do think we get, maybe 4, possibly 5 standout sequences here. And there's a detail in one that I love. It is the T-Rex. Not going to spoil it entirely, but let's just say the Delgados are making their way across the island, this family, and they encounter a T-Rex. Great reveal. I'm not going to spoil it, of not only what the creature is, this is, it reveals patience that Edwards brings to an
Another bit of
action
misdirection
sequence.
for the audience. Yeah.
And it also has a little detail. I'll just say there is a rubber raft, yellow rubber raft that's involved. And we get a great shot where a character is hiding underneath it. The T-Rex is above and pushes its snout into the raft. And you can see the triangles of the teeth protruding into the rubber to the breaking point. Things like that, maybe there was like some CGI assistance in that imagery, but you think of a visual idea, a simple idea like that, it is all you need. You do not need like a supercomputer creating herds of beasts rampaging across the screen. That is not nearly as scary as a simple, evocative image, which makes that one of the, I would say, many standout action set pieces in Rebirth.
Jurassic World Rebirth is currently playing in wide release. If you see it and agree or disagree with us, email us, feedback@filmspotting.net.
Yes, it's me. What a shock, etc. My path to personal growth has been paved with disappointment. I think we can agree that my biggest mistake was that I cared too much.
Actually, the biggest mistake you made was murdering 4 people and a dog.
Continuing the trend, I suppose, of confusing movie titles, if only to me, M3GAN 2.0, that's M, the number 3, GAN 2.0, the sequel to 2022's hit killer doll movie. And Josh, you, in preparation for this one, caught up with the original M3GAN. You liked it. Is it possible, based on your ratings? I can't remember exactly where you landed. 3.5, I think, out of 4 for this one on your site. Were you just a 3 for the other one? Do you like this one even more? A better sequel?
I had so much fun with this one, Adam. One of the most entertaining times in a theater this year, halfway through. And yeah, I mean, I'm no expert. I came to M3GAN late. I'm not going to pretend like I was right there at the beginning. I was certainly curious about the first film, but it went by me. And then when I heard everyone kind of going nuts for it, I just marked it like I'm going to have to catch up with that. A sequel was the perfect excuse. I did like this better because I feel like M3GAN 2.0 has a firmer sense of what it wants to do. It is a little longer, I believe. It, in a way, is more expansive, but its concerns are more focused. And I found this to be a rather compelling, interesting, provocative satire of the artificial intelligence, ethical debate that we're either having or that we should be having right now. And it's funny, some of the responses I've seen, they fault M3GAN 2.0 for its ethics on the notion of AI. And I just feel like this isn't a movie that's really trying to make a statement that it wants people to agree with. It is instead making fun of the illogical rationale in this debate, or the poor reasoning, or the hubris that's involved in it. It's really taking a bigger look at all of these questions we're embroiled in, and having a lot of fun with them, while also exposing, as I said, some of the hubris and so forth behind it. So it's a smart movie. It's really smart. And, I thought the first film was not so much about AI. It was about, to me, handing over our parenting responsibilities to technology. That's a very different thing. And it was a smart satire on that level. I enjoyed it for the elements it had. It got a little bit away from that and went for some, horror kills and things that were in a different direction. So I just love the focus that M3GAN 2.0 has, and it partly attained that by shifting genres. This is something that other folks are holding against it as well. It's not a horror film. It is like a sci-fi spy game genre flick. It's like, Mission Impossible. I described it as Mission Impossible if you took out Tom Cruise and plopped in RoboCop, except RoboCop was a, killer female doll. And that worked for me. This sort of idea of let's play in a different sandbox with related ideas. And here's the key, but further expand on this central character, which has always been the crowning achievement, always. These two movies now, it's the hallmark of them. The fact that they've been able to come up with a completely fabricated character who feels so real, a distinct personality, someone who is funny, who is sassy, yet somehow has this eerie element of automation to her that keeps you at a certain distance. And it's this thrilling combination of performance and special effects. They're using animatronics here, but they're also using a child actor, Amy Donald, in both films for some of the sequences. The vocal performer, M3GAN's voice, which is so key, is by Jenna Davis. And even in the sequences here in 2.0 where M3GAN, the program, is stuck in a smaller desktop body that looks like Eve from WALL-E, it's that vocal performance that is so strong that lets us know this is the same quote unquote person with the same attitudes and the one we've kind of come to maybe not love, but enjoy. And so I think that's a real feat too, that they've not only been able to carry that over to M3GAN 2.0, but expand on it in terms of who M3GAN is as a threat and sort of a figure we root for. So yeah, I don't know that people have, been down on M3GAN 2.0 as much as just said, here are sequelitis things that have frustrated me. I went the other direction. I thought they took a big risk here and it paid off.
I don't know why you had to look at me like that when you said handing over parenting responsibilities to technology. I don't need your judgment or the judgment of a doll with a number in her first name.
Are you looking for a M3GAN? Are you in the market for a M3GAN there in the Kempenaar household? I mean, things are busy. You guys are juggling a lot, so I wouldn't entirely blame you.
Yeah, we got our hands full right now. Certainly bringing up the topic of hubris is appropriate for this week's show. You've convinced me I need to catch up with the M3GAN series. And hey, they've got the name already set for the third one. There's going to be a third movie. There has to be a trilogy, right?
Yeah, and I think, they must have known it all along. That's why they chose their name at the beginning.
M3GAN 2.0 is currently playing in wide release. If you see it and agree or disagree with Josh's take, we would love to hear from you. You can email us feedback@filmspotting.net. Well, the two movies we just talked about are out wide, and you can see them right now at Regal Cinemas. M3GAN 2.0, that one I need to get to. Of course, we just saw Jurassic World Rebirth. In addition to Superman coming up, a couple other movies that I want to highlight. 40 Acres, starring Danielle Deadwyler, looks really interesting. That movie is starting this weekend. And Josh, I didn't make it, and neither did you. I didn't make it to F1,
yeah, I know.
The movie. And as far as I know, seems to be getting generally pretty good buzz. Bilga Abiri gave it on Letterboxd. I saw this. I saw the rating. Haven't read it yet. 5 stars.
Whoa. Yeah, my excuse for F1 is rather than going to see, the dad movie of the year, I think I was doing a total dad thing, failing to fix my microwave and having to call in a repair person to do it for me. So that took up my afternoon. Couldn't make it to F1, but do hope to catch up with it.
I didn't know you were the kind of dad who attempted to fix microwaves.
I mean, attempt is a strong word.
Apparently, because you called someone, which is also what I would do. So a lot of movies worth checking out. Like I said, I'm definitely going to be getting to F1 this weekend. And of course, a movie we talked about and did both recommend last week, 28 Years Later, also playing now at Regal Cinemas. These are all movies you can see for free if you have Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Regal is offering Filmspotting listeners endless movies for less. If you sign up using code FilmSpot25, you get 10% off a 3-month subscription. Regal Unlimited is the only truly limitless movie subscription pass. You get to see any standard 2D movie anytime with no blackout dates or restrictions, and you save money on tickets and concessions. Members get 10% off all non-alcoholic concessions with Regal Unlimited. So sign up now in the Regal app or click the link in the description for this episode. Don't forget to use the code FilmSpot25 to receive your discount.
This episode is brought to you by Starbucks. Smooth, bright, deliciously crafted. Introducing Starbucks Sansera Blend, their smoothest, brightest coffee yet. It's a new kind of light roast, one that's packed with so much flavor, it shines no matter how you brew it. So go ahead and try it hot, iced, black, or with a splash of creamer. Visit athome.starbucks.com/Sansera-blend-coffee to bring Starbucks Sansera Blend home.
Listening is the number one thing you can do to support an independently produced show like ours. There are a couple of other things you can do. You could take a minute to give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Doesn't matter if you're brand new or have been around for 20 years. Every time we get a new review, it helps us reach new listeners. Another way to support us, and this is really the lifeblood of the show, it is to join the Filmspotting family over at filmspottingfamily.com. We want to say thank you to advisory board member. There are a couple of levels you can choose when you're becoming a Filmspotting family member. The advisory board people, these are the folks with all the pull. Scott Bosch from Pocopson, Pennsylvania. I hear that's just outside Philadelphia, is on that board. So thanks so much for that, Scott. Scott's a good follow on Letterboxd as well. If you want to keep up with him there, his username is SBOSCH.
And Scott's always an active participator in those advisory board calls, which we very much appreciate. Scott says, I was looking to get into more podcasts and wanted a movie one. Honestly, I probably first gave it a try because of the play on Trainspotting, which I love, and thought the name of the show was clever. I probably started listening around 2007 because I remember No Country and There Will Be Blood being early reviews I listened to. A favorite review or segment, my all-time favorite moment is still the I'm Still Here review. That sticks in my head all these years later. Yeah, memorable. A review we got wrong. Okay, Adam is wrong on the Dune movies. These are exactly the kind of films we should want from blockbuster filmmaking. They introduce fully formed worlds and never slow down to hold the audience's hand. They demand you pay attention even on multiple viewings. But most importantly, they are a visionary work from a filmmaker, not something created by a committee from a studio. Also, they're basically Star Wars for grown-ups, and that ain't too bad either. I do appreciate that Adam has truly earned back the moniker of Art House Adam, though. I don't know, Scott. I think I can appreciate the approach and what you're saying. I agree. They are the kind of films we should want from blockbuster filmmaking, but still not really like the storytelling that much. Letterboxd top 4, Star Wars, The Godfather, A Clockwork Orange, and Taxi Driver. Okay, listen, I know this is like the most basic Film Bro 4 faves, but I'm in my mid-40s, and these are the movies I discovered as I was getting into movies and are pretty responsible for me becoming a cinephile. A favorite he revisited recently, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a favorite, but I recently rewatched Thief as part of seeing all of Michael Mann's movies with my son. It really clicked for me in a way it didn't the first time. I loved it. Yeah, good movie. A random film or filmmaker, he loves Josh's PTA. Calls him the greatest filmmaker of his generation, and I can't be convinced otherwise. Okay, we won't try. We're good with that. A movie he credits for becoming a cinephile. There were a bunch I hunted down at the local video store, but the first in a theater that kind of opened my mind to what movies could be is probably Pulp Fiction. And finally, a book about movies or movie making from Scott, The Film Club. It's about a period of time where a man watched movies with his son after he dropped out of high school. That's a new title to me.
Yeah, new to me. Is your impression fiction or is it like a diary nonfiction? It is. Okay, yeah, fiction.
Fiction is my impression, but I'm going to have to look it up and learn more. Thank you so much, Scott, for that and for your support of Filmspotting by being a family member. If you would like to become a family member, you can learn more at filmspottingfamily.com.
Something pretty bad happened to me.
Did it just happen?
No. It was a little over 3 years ago.
Well, that's not that much time.
I know this is hard to talk
That's Ava Victor with John Carroll Lynch in the Ava Victor written and directed Sorry Baby, which is currently playing in limited release. Victor plays Agnes, a college professor still trying to process a traumatic experience. Naomi Ackie and Lucas Hedges also star. The film debuted at this year's Sundance, where Victor won the screenwriting prize. I know you saw it, Josh, at the Chicago Critics Film Festival, where it got a lot of good buzz there, and it continues to get a lot of good buzz. I'm really frustrated that I can't see it, but where I'm located, it's not going to play at my favorite theater until later in July. But since you've seen it and it is opening in theaters in Chicago this weekend, we wanted to make sure to give it a little time. It's Victor's writing and directing debut, so the key question for us here at Filmspotting is, should this be a Golden Brick nominee?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think we have maybe 4 titles in the running at this point, at the midway point of the year. And I think it's in the lead right now. This is such a strong debut with that unique authorial vision that we talk about. And yet at the same time, it's very unassuming in its sense of assuredness. I don't know. I've been having trouble trying to describe to people whether this is a friendship comedy that kind of sneaks in some intense seriousness, or is this first and foremost something like and I don't mean this derisively, but like a trauma drama that understands laughter is a part of that real life experience as well. It is this balancing act this is the unique voice that we're looking for in a Golden Brick that a filmmaker has. It is the balancing act of those tones. Also the balancing act of the movie's construction. It jumps in time in ways that is not ostentatious, but crucial for the effect and the reveal of certain plot developments. And everything that I've described in terms of the tone of the movie itself can also be found in Victor's lead performance. The way they just hit, there's a scene here, and I don't think this is a spoiler, so I'll say it, but there's a scene early on when her friend Liddy tells Agnes that she's pregnant. And we're watching Victor's face receiving this information, and you see the genuine excitement for her friend, for Agnes's friend. You see disbelief that this is happening and this is the stage of life they're in. And then they give a little sideways glance that just tells us Agnes knows in that moment their friendship will never be the same. And so for Victor to be able to bring all that to a small scene, it's just an example of what happens throughout in the performance, in the movie. And it's one of those that the longer you sit with it, you'll realize how accomplished it is in what it is trying to do. And yeah, you mentioned Hedges in there. So good to see him back on the screen. And John Carroll Lynch, just like, I mean, maybe a 6-minute scene, like just kind of like slips into your chest and scoops out your heart and tucks it in his pocket and walks away. It's like before he even did it, you realize you've been devastated by this little mini performance in the movie. So a lot of reasons to see this movie, Sorry Baby, on its own, but especially as we're considering the Golden Brick nominees for this year.
Can't wait. Sorry Baby is currently playing in select cities. If you see it, we would love to hear your thoughts. Feedback at filmspotting.net. We have put it off a couple of times, but next week we promise, and it sounds like Sorry Baby may be in the running anyway. It's our top 5 films of 2025. So far, I know we both have been trying to catch up with anything and everything we can see, but that's not all. We're going to talk about the best, second best, I don't know, maybe third best, and that certainly wouldn't be a bad position to be in when you hear some of these titles in a second, of the year 1960. We're going to talk about Billy Wilder's The Apartment. This movie is in the Filmspotting Pantheon, and it was part of the 21st Filmspotting Marathon back in 2010. We, of course, recently completed, Josh, our 51st marathon. And we're talking about this movie because it is celebrating its 65th anniversary. And we've got this ongoing Pantheon project where we're trying to give a full, in-depth discussion, both of us, me and you. We're trying to give an in-depth discussion to every movie that is in the Pantheon. Those movies from 1960, well, it is competing against Psycho, Breathless, and La Dolce Vita.
Yeah. Yeah. And The Apartment, all those 4 films in one year is pretty incredible. I'll confess, Adam, I've already rewatched this. We had, a night where the family was just looking for something to watch together. And a lot of times we end up with classics that kind of pleases everyone. And so I was like, hey, I've got The Apartment coming up. Only Debbie had seen it at that point. And so let's give it a whirl. Love when these movies go over so well with younger generations, and just loved watching it again. We are going to have a great conversation about this one.
Yeah. Also next week, results and your feedback from the current Filmspotting poll asking you to choose your favorite film of 2025 so far. You can vote and leave a comment at filmspotting.net. If you would like to see a schedule of future shows, at least what we currently have planned, you can visit filmspotting.net/episodes.
From director Robert Altman comes a story of Hollywood.
I got a writer in here who's got a pitch I think you ought to hear. I think it's hot.
We open outside San Quentin.
The Graduate, Part 2. And Mrs. Robinson had a stroke.
Adam, I am deep in preparation for Cinema Interruptus, The Player, which will be this August at Gene Siskel Film Center. And one question I have in the back of my mind is if The Apartment is one of those classic movies whose poster lines the halls of the studio. If you remember in The Player, there are so many posters, and Altman and his collaborators chose specifically which ones. There's some reason, right? And now I'm thinking, are we going to spend a full day at Interruptus? I think someone even asked me this on social media, just dissecting the posters in the background. And I'm panicking because you could absolutely do that with this movie. There's so much good movie Hollywood lore to dig into. But of course, the format for this, we only have 3 days to make it through The Player after watching it on that first day. So we can't get stuck on the posters too long. So many other details we want to dig into. Again, those tickets for Cinema Interruptus are now available. Our dates are August 11 through 14. So August 11, we watch The Player in full. And then the next couple of days, we start at the beginning and go through it scene by scene. Anyone can jump in with a question or a comment. We're going to offer 4-day package that's available if you want to be there for the whole thing, or if you can only make 1 day, there are single day tickets, and you could get those at siskelfilmcenter.org/interruptus. This week on our sister podcast, The Next Picture Show, it is part 2 of their For Love or Money pairing. They are going to add to the Materialists debate I keep seeing as more reviews roll in on Letterboxd. Adam, I feel like I get one that's a rave, and then another one will come by that's just ripping it apart. It's really been a divisive film, which is interesting for what's, sort of a romantic comedy or dramedy. So it'll be very curious to see where the Next Picture Show folks land on Materialists. They, of course, previously talked about Pride and Prejudice, so part of their discussion will be comparing it to that Joe Wright film. New episodes of The Next Picture Show drop every Tuesday, and you can get them wherever you get your podcasts. It is time now for Massacre Theatre, where we perform a scene and you get a chance to win a Filmspotting prize. Last time, we massacred this scene.
Hey, Aaron! I think you're the devil! You know I'm not! How? Because I think we have the kind of friendship where if I were the devil, you'd be the only one I would tell.
Well, you were awfully quick to run after Tom's help when
all right,
you
fine.
wanted help.
Yes! And if things had gone well for me tonight, then I probably wouldn't be saying any of this. I grant you everything. But give me this. He personifies everything that you've been fighting against. And I'm in love with you. How do you like that? I buried the lead.
Albert Brooks there with Holly Hunter in 1987's Broadcast News, written directed by James L. Brooks. Along with massacring that great scene, we also had a review of Materialists and The Life of Chuck. Why did we choose a scene from Broadcast News?
Well, here's Aaron in Manhattan. You guys massacred Broadcast News, the James L. Brooks film about a brilliant woman caught in a love triangle with a smart, capable, sincere, but cynical Albert Brooks and the pretty boy charmer William Hurt. I haven't seen Materialists, but it sounds like a similar premise executed to much less than perfection. Every character in Broadcast News is so uniquely themselves and evocatively performed. You never doubt who these people are, and you never question why they are who they are. Also, there is not a line in Broadcast News that makes me think, put your pen down. As you said about Materialists, if anything, I want it to keep going forever. In fact, maybe I'll go watch it right now.
Here's Evelyn So from New York City. Einstein, very clever, Adam. That's Albert Brooks's real name. Highly doubt I'll win twice in a row, but I had to write in because I love broadcast news. The link is easy too, cited as one of Celine Song's inspirations for Materialists. Also involving love triangle and romantic dramedy, although there is way more calm in this movie. Hurrah and bye. Need to go have my 1 minute of crying.
Yeah, I don't remember what we changed Jane's name to, if we did, and I assume we did, but we had to change Aaron's name, and I went with Einstein because indeed his name in real life is Albert Einstein. I will note that Sam wasn't aware of the Celine Song list when he picked this movie. He was just going purely off the love triangle, but it is one of those films that is on the list of inspirations for Materialists. Finally, Liz Stickle in Wheaton, Illinois says, both films with career women who are the best at what they do, caught in a love triangle between Mr. Charming and Mr. Good Listener. I think that's a good way to frame it. Now, she has another line here, Josh, that I'm actually going to refrain from reading because it references the ending to Materialists and broadcast news. And while it isn't explicitly a spoiler per se, it could be a spoiler if you are someone who has seen broadcast news but not Materialists. And I will just note, for Liz out there anyway, I agree with her. So thank you, Liz.
Yeah, I think we split on this point. When we reviewed broadcast news, I forget what the occasion was, but I loved it as you did until we got to that ending.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
we can't really discuss it anymore. Go find it in the archives. Find it in the archives and we'll, we get to it there.
Though it's a bonus content review, but not to belabor it, I think you're referencing maybe the very, very, very end of broadcast news. I don't think that's what Liz is referencing.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just assuming
we'll talk off air. We'll talk off air, Josh.
Okay.
Reach into the Filmspotting hat and pick out this week's winner.
Our winner is Brandon Gittles here in Chicago. I hope I got that right, Brandon. Congratulations.
Yeah, at least we think you're in Chicago. I'm basing that off a previous entry. Congratulations, Brandon. You can email us at feedback@filmspotting.net to claim your prize, either a trial membership to the Filmspotting family, if you're not already one, or a Filmspotting tote bag or Filmspotting t-shirt.
Tear sticks are doping for actors. Do you want to be the Lance Armstrong of theater?
No.
Get off the stick.
We move on now to this week's edition of Massacre Theatre, impeccably chosen by producer Sam.
So good. How he remembered this, I don't know, but I love it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. You have the bigger role here. I actually have a part that has been combined, 2 parts combined into one. There is but one of me here. We have changed the name of my character, as we do, to try to make it a little bit harder. I don't know that that's going to work, Josh. People who know this movie are certainly going to know this scene.
Right away. And also, this is in your contract. If I have more lines in Massacre Theatre, you get to take on a second part. So we're just following your contract here.
I really want to see the hand gestures. That's all I'm going to say.
I might need them to help me.
Okay. I started off. Actually, you started off. I'm going to give you the action. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
And action.
Okay, here's a thought. I see an empty stage. I see drums. I see a drummer. I see a microphone. And I see a singer.
Dad, come on.
What?
We gave that stuff up.
Listen to me, Cal. Look, when I was a kid, when I was a little boy, I always wanted to be a dinosaur. I wanted to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex more than anything in the world. I made my arms short and I roamed the backyard and I chased the neighborhood cats and I growled and I roared. Everybody knew me and was afraid of me. And then one day my dad said, "Bobby, you're 17. It's time to throw childish things aside." And I said, "Okay, Pop." But he didn't really say that. He said, "Stop being an effing dinosaur and get a job." But I thought to myself, I'll go to medical school. I'll practice for a little while and then I'll come back to it.
Dad, how is that a skill?
I forgot how to do it.
You're a human. You could never be a dinosaur.
Hey, I lost it.
Hey, Dad, what's the point?
The point is don't lose your dinosaur.
And scene. Now, the problem is the writing's so good. Notice I said the writing, not the performance, though you were fine, Josh. I broke character there and started laughing.
It's so good. And, also oddly inspirational. I think I'm just going to keep that in my back pocket if I'm feeling down. Don't lose your dinosaur.
I think we need to make t-shirts or maybe coffee mugs. If you know what film we just massacred, email the movie's title and your name and location to feedback@filmspotting.net. Your deadline is Monday, July 14th. We will select the winner randomly from all the correct entries and announce it in a couple of weeks.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Yes, welcome. Help yourself to as much melted ice cream as you'd like. Also, if you need to use the restroom,
good scene.
Please note that we've set them up al fresco. Very chic. Just how huge of a hit was Jurassic Park in 1993? 7 movies grossed over $100 million that year, from 7 to 1, In the Line of Fire, Indecent Proposal, Mrs. Doubtfire, Sleepless in Seattle, The Firm, The Fugitive, and in the top spot, Steven Spielberg's CGI Game Changer, which was the only one of those smashes to gross over $200 million because it actually grossed over $300 million. It's not difficult to see why it was such a success. Long before IMAX, Dolby Vision, and other enhanced viewing experiences, seeing Jurassic Park at the cinema in '93 felt like, well, going to Jurassic Park. And that was true even on my relatively dinky little screen at the Capitol 2 where I worked in Newton, Iowa. The memorably awestruck faces and near-collapsing bodies of Sam Neill's Dr. Alan Grant and Laura Dern's Dr. Ellie Sattler when they see the brachiosaur, that was pretty much all of us. So dazzled by the special effects that maybe for the first time watching a movie, we didn't have to work at all to suspend our disbelief. Spielberg, like Richard Attenborough's John Hammond, had done it. He created real dinosaurs. Josh, when we were teasing this discussion recently, you proposed that to give Jurassic Park the fairest possible shake, you were basically going to try to brainwash yourself. This time, you would watch Jurassic Park pretending that a different all-time Spielberg classic didn't exist. I jumped in to suggest that title had to be Raiders of the Lost Ark, the 80s kid action-adventure equivalent of this 90s kid fave. While he's no Indiana Jones, Dr. Grant even has a similarly defining look, Panama-style hat, red paisley bandana around his neck, aviator-style sunglasses. You said Jaws, and I'll be honest, I didn't make anything more of it beyond the obvious connections of giant things with giant teeth chomping people and blockbusters, with Jaws, of course, being the reason that word exists. We revisited Jaws for its 45th anniversary in 2020, and with insights from that conversation still fresh in my mind as I watched Jurassic Park, I noticed the connections maybe went a little deeper. Aren't Jurassic Park and Amity Beach both essentially amusement parks? Places for family entertainment? Places for family entertainment that bring in or have the potential to bring in lots and lots of dollars? That also happen to be wildly unsafe, irresponsibly unsafe, considering that in both cases, the decision makers have more than enough information to make the calls to shut the parks down. But Sheriff Brody succumbs to the pressure to open the beach, and poor Alex Kintner is sacrificed, just as Hammond's obsession to get his park open leads him to almost sacrificing his own grandchildren. Tell me, were you able to view Jurassic Park through a Jaws-less lens? And if so, did your strategy pay off? Or is it possible that your selective amnesia clouded you from further appreciating the work of Spielberg and screenwriters David Koepp and Michael Crichton adapting Crichton's novel?
It sounds like I might have thrown you off by that suggestion. It sounds like I put Jaws in your head. And so now I'm curious to hear how that might have affected your viewing. I was largely successful. It required a lot of work. It was, brainwashing myself wasn't easy because I've always found the parallels to be so clear. But whenever I would start to hear that music, that Jaws score coming in the background, I said no. I shut it off and I focused on what was on the screen and pretended like I was a kid who maybe did grow up in the 90s, had not seen Jaws, maybe knew nothing about it, and walked in to watch Jurassic Park. And I understand, I've always understood the appeal, the allure. For the record, both of us have always liked this movie. We liked it when we first saw it and have liked it largely since. I think what this allowed me to do was to look for other areas that I have maybe not appreciated enough about this film because I was spending time dismissing it in comparison to Jaws. And one thing that, now this isn't a deal breaker, this doesn't elevate it to the level of Jaws, but you've referenced twice now Richard Attenborough as Hammond. Mm-hmm. And Adam, that was maybe my major takeaway from this viewing, is that even separate from the Jaws comparisons, I love what you're bringing out there. You know, in a way, he's maybe a version of the mayor, of Amityville's mayor, except we have an extremely complicated figure here, not this straight up villain who we're going to get in later Jurassic films, these corporate, CEOs who are clearly, even if they pretend to be nice, just avaricious, caring nothing for anyone. Here we have this grandfatherly, kindly, gentlemanly man who appreciates nature, who loves dinosaurs, who loves his grandkids, but is also a self-deluded, the term we'd use now is a disruptor, right? A rich guy who thinks they can just skip the line because they've inherited, usually these guys inherit their money, and just wreak havoc for the rest of us by being dumb and rich. And, there's a line that jumped out here in Jurassic Park: Hammond hates inspections. They slow everything down. And I haven't watched this yet, but I was listening to a Slate Culture Gabfest discussion of the recent documentary about that Titanic submersible company, the entrepreneur who he died with clients when the vessel failed. And they were talking about how the doc brings up all of the safety regulations that were ignored in the favor of speed and profit, essentially. Hammond is that guy too. And Attenborough allows us to see that guy. There were more Hammond scenes than I usually noticed. And I think it's because I was looking for things like that to notice by putting Jaws to the side. I think Attenborough is very good in the performance, and you referenced the ice cream scene. I think that's a key scene for it. This comes when
it's a good scene.
Everything has fallen apart. And he's there eating the ice cream because what does he say? Otherwise it will melt. And it's just like, it's binge eating, it's guilt eating, and there's regret there. But what does he also do in that scene? I forget the exact particulars, but doesn't he reference his future plans that he still has for this enterprise? So he, in the face of his grandchildren almost being eaten, he's remorseful, but he's not done.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Hiring Nedry was a mistake. That's obvious. We're over-dependent on automation. I can see that now. Now, the next time, everything's correctable. Creation is an act of sheer will. Next time, it'll be flawless.
And this is the kind of complicated characterization that I don't think the rest of Jurassic Park has, that I think is strewn throughout Jaws, that every character has. Here we get it, and it's something I didn't give the movie credit for, maybe because I was focusing on the characters who didn't have it, and I missed the guy who did, which was Richard Attenborough's Hammond. So I think I like the movie a little bit more this time around, and that was one of the reasons.
I can see that. I really like the performance. I do agree that character is maybe more complex than I gave him credit for before, or gave the screenplay credit for before. This is the third time, I think only the third time I've seen Jurassic Park, start to finish anyway. I probably saw parts of it 100 times when it came out because I was working at the movie theater when it came out. I am still chasing the high, I think, of that initial viewing. Based on the last two viewings, I do still find it thoroughly fine. And I definitely didn't have selective amnesia with Jaws when it came to that comparison. And you can compare Hammond to the mayor, sure. There is another comparison I found more interesting. I'll say this, though, sort of big picture about the movie and touch on that comparison, which I want to dig into more. The effects, puppetry, animatronic, and the early CGI remain movie magic.
Yeah. hold up so well.
And as a cautionary tale disguised as an amusement park thrill ride, its intensity is undeniable. Though I'm drawn to the parallels between Hammond and Spielberg as obsessed visionaries bent on creative control. And that includes not just Spielberg himself, but the Spielberg stand-ins that are strewn throughout his work. That was among my big surprises watching the film this time. And when we talk about these sacred cows, usually when it's been 10 plus years, we see those elements, just like you were touching on Attenborough, watching through a different lens or just watching it for the first time in a while. There are always things you didn't pick up on before, or you just found more fascinating. And I had 3 things we'll get into. I won't go into detail on all of them now, but there were 3 elements that really stood out to me. And they all, Josh, mark Jurassic Park as specifically Spielbergian beyond just the craft of it, which does make the film more interesting to me, even if I'm still critical of the film. And one of those things is the Jaws of it, which we've already touched on. And look, I understand the challenges or the problems, the flaws of making the connection between Jaws and Jurassic Park, or leaning too heavily into it. One of those is, whereas there is some levity in Jaws, there are moments of straight up comedy in Jurassic Park. It is a much lighter movie overall. Mm-hmm. And that could partly explain why some of the things I'll touch on don't pack the same punch. But it still is in many ways Jaws on land. Also, I understand the exercise that you were embarking on, right? Trying to kind of free yourself from seeing it through that lens. But I also think this can be a little bit misleading when people hear me say what I was doing or even what you were doing. I didn't have Jaws in mind at all when I watched or thought about Jurassic Park the last time I saw it in the theater when it was re-released in 2012. And I thought it was just okay then too. Nor was I actively comparing it this time either. This is the stuff you're thinking about when you're processing your reaction and trying to understand why you're reacting the way you are. Jaws is just a reference point for helping me figure out why I'm not, or what I'm not responding strongly to. It's not the reason I'm not responding strongly. And I think there's a key difference there. You said something interesting too, when you mentioned kind of putting yourself in the shoes of being a kid watching Jurassic Park. And you and I both surely saw, even though we weren't old enough to see Jaws in the theater, we both surely saw Jaws when we were kids for the first time. Though I don't think of Jaws at all as a kid's movie, whereas Jurassic Park definitely does feel like a kid's movie, right? Fittingly for Spielberg, he introduces kids into it. They're almost the main characters, along with Dr. Grant. We experience the movie in some cases through their eyes, their sense of wonder, their sense of fear, certainly. So wanting more from it, or maybe wanting it to be more serious, like I do anyway, isn't fair. Though even that's nuanced, Josh, because, Jaws, I don't think the R rating existed then, or it definitely didn't. But Jaws was rated PG, and it's still PG. Now, if it came out now, obviously it would be at minimum PG-13.
Yeah.
But I still think that Jurassic Park has, to say it's a kid's movie is still difficult, because it has more violence in it and more intense scares in it, I think, than Jaws does. I don't even think it's close. I think that T-Rex sequence alone is far scarier than anything in Jaws. And you may remember this, when I took my kids back in 2012, Quinn was only about 5.5 years old. Now, people listening may say, gosh, how could you have done that? Well, I hadn't seen Jurassic Park at that point in many years, right? Since it came out. So I didn't remember how intense it was. And I was taking his slightly older siblings, and 5.5, that's the age when you get really into dinosaurs. I was really into dinosaurs at 5.5. He was super into dinosaurs. I thought, okay, I'll bring him along. At the T-Rex sequence, he flipped out so much, I had to call his mother and have her pick him up at the movie theater before I could go back in and finish the movie. So I'm just saying, 5.5 may sound obviously like it's too young to see Jurassic Park, but whatever the ideal age is, I'm going to say it's a lot closer to 13 than it is 5. Okay, so kids movie, Okay, sure. But in terms of that comparison, right, if we're thinking about it in its relationship to Jaws, because of those very clear connections to it, the satire element is there, but the commentary about putting economic interests ahead of public safety is nowhere near as potent. I'm not as attached, nor do I care about, nor simply want to spend time with the characters. Anyone in this movie, asterisk, I'll come back to one of them, the way I want to hang out, right, with Brody and Quint and Hooper. The screenplay does obviously have a few very memorable lines and scenes. Life Finds a Way, Clever Girl, Malcolm's big lunch monologue. None of them really strike with the same force as some of the key scenes in Jaws. And then emotion, too. And I think this movie is going for some real emotional moments. So I think this is totally fair. And this will lead into one of my other big surprises. Despite a lot of very pointed attempts to play up Grant's transformation and his relationship with the kids, nothing here has the same impact, at least for me, as Brody and his son at the dinner table, or Mrs. Kintner slapping Brody. So this isn't the only level on which I'm going to be critical of this movie, is just comparing it to Jaws. But since this is how we initially framed the conversation, I do think it's fair. And the connections between the two films are obviously undeniably there.
Yeah, and to be absolutely clear, and this is where I'll close off on the Jaws things just for myself, is by no means did I come to this viewing and say that Jurassic Park is as good as Jaws and that I had just been nostalgic in my estimation. I think every point you made is true. I've, written about at length about the ways it falls short of Jaws. And the word I keep coming back to in that critique is mechanical. Jurassic Park feels mechanical to me, and Jaws does not. My exercise here was, again, to give myself blinders so that I could find newer things to appreciate. And to that end, it was successful. Yeah, and it was successful in new ways, new things I found, as I said, largely Attenborough, but then just reappreciating and being able to enjoy the things I've always liked about Jurassic Park without a yeah but. And I do want to spend some time on the brilliant sequences in Jurassic Park, which I do think the filmmaking is on par with what you get in Jaws. And this time, those blinders allowed me to only think about them on their own terms, to notice maybe particular choices and decisions and techniques and notice more of them. That's what happened to me, Adam, is I noticed it's not just the T-Rex sequence, which I do want to spend a little time breaking down. It's not just that where I noticed Spielberg's prowess, but telling myself to just look for it in this movie. I want to bring up one shot. And it's a seemingly inconsequential shot. It happens early on. It's where Grant, Ellie, and Malcolm are in one of the tour cars going along the tracks, and they're looking out the window, and Spielberg chooses a profile shot. So we see all three of them from the side in the same frame, and we can see a little bit of each of their faces. And this is where that, I think it's one of the clever bits of dialogue where Malcolm begins with God creates dinosaurs and then proceeds, right?
Right.
Well, we get all their faces in profile, as I said. It starts in focus on Malcolm, and then there's a rack focus to Ellie when she delivers the punchline. Women inherit the world.
Right.
We can see Grant, because of the framing choice, we can see Grant, who hasn't said a word throughout all of this, smiling in the background. There's character work there because this is a dynamic among the three of them that's been back and forth. So the shot enables all of that to happen without a single edit. And then we get the camera pushing in on Ellie and swinging around so it can fully face her as she observes something out the window. This is just, again, it's inconsequential, but it could have been filmed in so many other ways where you didn't get the suspense, you didn't get the characterization, you didn't get the dynamic among the characters. This is what Spielberg does. And this is another thing, by being able to just focus on the text in front of me, at least I could say, you know what, never noticed that before, but how many filmmakers would shoot it that way? And how many would be as effective in what they wanted to convey? I think there's a lot of that in Jurassic Park, which I was, happy to discover this umpteenth time watching it.
Yeah. And for all of the revolutionary techniques that he is employing in terms of the effects, how about the classical approach with subtle things like just using props? You mentioned the scene between Hammond and Ellie when they are talking over ice cream. And I think this is, I mean, it's obviously a key scene. I think it's a really important scene for reasons that I'll get into later. But how does that scene conclude? That entire scene has been them having this dialogue where he is eating that ice cream, and they've been in conflict with each other. And by the end, she challenges him enough that he does seem to come around to her point of view, or at least seems to acquiesce to her point of view and understand. They come to a meeting of the minds by the end of that conversation. And so how does it end? It ends with her taking a bite of the ice cream. The entire conversation, she hasn't touched the ice cream, Josh. She takes a bite of the ice cream at the end. She comments on how good it is. He says a line about how he's spared no expense, and the scene ends. Like, those little touches are there for a reason. They add those little character touches, but they're very subtly, but it's there. They're bonding over the ice cream because they have come to an understanding by the end of that scene.
Yeah. And this, to your point, like, there are many moments like that which don't rely on CGI or animatronics or anything like that, and are incredibly effective.
Now, let's talk about another performance or another element of this film that absolutely elevates this movie, even though, unfortunately, I'm also going to bring it around to a criticism of this movie. I'm sorry. Jeff Goldblum is Ian Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot how much damn fun he is having. He is going for it. In one of his earliest scenes, it may have even been his first scene. I can't remember if it's when they get to the island or they're still on the helicopter. He punctuates a moment. He's delivered some line, and he punctuates the moment by almost doing a dinosaur impression.
Oh, yeah.
He kind of snarls.
So you two dig up dinosaurs?
Well,
Try to.
He snarls deliciously, and he's smiling the entire time. I think his character, well, actually, I don't see how you would argue with this, because you can just look at the screenplay and it's there. In terms of the smartest dialogue that lays out all the big questions of the screenplay as a cautionary tale, all the man versus nature, hubris, man playing God conflicts, it's really only there because his character lays it out. Every time he opens his mouth.
Yes.
Every time he opens his mouth, and I'm going to get to the other thing that's usually coming out, if it's not this, he is saying something very intellectually interesting, and you want to hear more. He has the smartest dialogue in the film. And when he's delivering it, like the snarl, he's making fun choices, like the time when he pounds on the table twice to again punctuate little moments. And what is he doing when he's not being super intelligent, being the smartest guy in the room? Every other moment is him taking every opportunity to hit on Laura Dern's character.
Of course.
Adore it, right? Like, honestly, sign me up for the version of Jurassic Park, Josh, where Ian Malcolm seduces Ellie into being the next future ex-Mrs. Malcolm. I'd be on board with that version of this film. And all of this is why, though, it's absolutely unforgivable that they somehow made a choice to sideline Ian Malcolm for almost the entire second half of the movie. The only choices Jeff Goldblum gets to make for the second half of this film are variations on how am I going to sit up and groan slightly differently. Oh, what do you know? It's Jeff Goldblum still just laying there on a table, sitting up occasionally. It's crazy. It's criminal.
So first of all, I have to say his performance prompted me to Google Images search for the Burt Reynolds Playgirl spread, because I swear on this watch, Goldblum is purposefully positioning himself, or someone directed him to, in the exact pose of that Reynolds.
Yes, you're right. You're right. It's amazing.
And it's when he has the shirt open. It's like, that's just brilliant. And in line with all the other choices he's making as a performer, right? Interesting what you say about unforgivable to lose him, because do I want more of that performance? Of course I do. I generally agree with you. But M3GAN 2.0 strangely suggested something to me. Jermaine Clement shows up early in that film as very amusing, as like a tech, CEO, rich guy. And it's a completely joke performance that works for me. I loved it. And then after two scenes, I think he's gone. He's gone from the rest of the movie. And for a while I was like, oh, he's not going to be back. But then after the film, I was like, would I really have wanted more of Jermaine Clement in the movie? Like, does the movie really need that? And so Goldblum is far funnier here in Jurassic Park, but it's a similar dynamic where I do wonder if they'd given us too much of that. If he'd been keep delivering the same thing, it would have worn thin. I also know it does wear thin because he is in, I think, like 5 at least of the next Jurassic movies. And yeah, he doesn't need to be. So maybe this is all he needs to be in Jurassic Park. I don't know.
Maybe. One other element I want to touch on, and it goes back to the practical effects that are on display here. My favorite dinosaur. Did you go through a dinosaur phase, Josh? I imagine almost every kid does, or a good majority of us.
I think it's weird because I was obsessed with animal nature documentaries and watching them on TV. But I don't remember dinosaurs being, one thing about Jurassic Park is I feel that's when it became more popular for kids to study. And both things kind of happened side by side. So I feel like I was almost, it wasn't as big. Obviously, if you were into it, it was out there and maybe you just had to search for it a little bit more. So I was like a nature animal kid, but I don't remember having a dinosaur phase, which, strikes me as a little strange now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, those were the books that I was drawn to when back in the day, you had nothing to do except go to the library, right? In the summer, you'd ride your bike down to the library and you get books. And I got dinosaur books, and Triceratops was always my favorite dinosaur, which is maybe why I love the scene so much. And that's a Stan Winston puppet. And to be able to have this great CGI used, but also then have something practical like that, a puppet where you can have Laura Dern actually lay on the thing and have it breathe and have it feel
when he feels the breath in, and when Grant does and rises with the belly. Those are like the wonder touches, right? Which,
that's it.
I want to talk a little bit more about wonder at one point, and I do think Jurassic Park probably has more of it than I gave it credit for previously. But finish what you were saying.
Well, I want to pivot actually to those Spielbergian aspects. So do you want to stay on wonder before we get into that?
I want to quickly note, and this is for, Filmspotting family members, it made me think of one reason I was so bad at trivia spotting with the dinosaur speed. Maybe it's because I didn't have those books that you were reading.
Right.
But I did enjoy, after that debacle of my answer, which I don't even remember what it was, about how fast a T-Rex can run, I did enjoy 2 references to dino speed in this movie that I'd forgotten. We clocked the T-Rex at 32 miles per hour. I remembered that.
That was the question you botched.
Yes, that was it. It was the botched question. I didn't remember there was the other reference at some point about raptors going 50 to 60 miles per hour. So I was closer. Just double that. I think.
No,
and I was close.
Quadruple that, Josh. Quadruple that.
Didn't I say 200
You were
something?
like 212.
Yeah, I was a little off. I mean,
I'm pretty sure
I should have spent more time with those dino books. No, as a kid, the Spielberg thing that always got me, it's in E.T., it's gotten everyone, is the wonder thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes in moments big and small. It's in that moment with the Triceratops we just discussed. It is in the way we experience the reveal of the dinosaurs for the first time in that field through Grant.
Yes.
And it's not just in the CGI. It's more in Grant's face.
It's in the performance, him and Dern.
In the performance. And it's
you know that they're looking at nothing. So that's what makes it even more incredible.
It's little touches like the expression, yes, but the way he fumbles with his glasses. This is a guy who we've known to not be really a fuss budget professor type. Like he's very precise. He's very serious. So to see him suddenly like kind of be flummoxed tells you how in awe he is. And then the choice to have, Ellie looking the other way and him have to gently turn her head to so you could see what I'm seeing. Those are choices. Again, to your earlier point, no effects are needed there, but it's incredibly effective. And then even here's one where there are a lot of effects, but the same sequence, I think it concludes with this beautifully composed long shot of them on the bluff looking at this, safari type display of dinosaurs down by a lake in the background. It's just beautiful. And that's where we feel like we're sitting next to them, taking all of this in. So yeah, I think wonder is something that is a through line in Spielberg's work. It's interesting. And this goes to the point of my underrating of Jurassic Park is a couple of years ago for the Think Christian Movie Club, we had a meeting about Transcendent Spielberg. And so I made a video examining the motif of people just looking up, Close Encounters, E.T. You can picture them all as I'm saying this, right?
Yep. The opposite of the Kubrick shot in a way,
yeah,
right?
Pretty much, exactly. Yeah. And I omitted Jurassic Park. I didn't include one from there, and I could have and should have, as this recent rewatch shows, because we get a few beautiful examples of that.
So maybe a different kind of wonder here, right? This is more wondrous in terms of the technical proficiency and the craft. You touched on it already, but I'm going to ask a question, though it is maybe a bit of a sacrilegious question, about what is an incredible sequence. Don't get me wrong. The T-Rex sequence is incredible filmmaking, even if I think Lex's light getting stuck on is really clunky. I'm going to say that first. The sequence itself is great. But my sacrilegious question is this, Josh. Everyone points to how incredible it is. The thinking behind the touch, Spielberg's decision to show that the T-Rex is approaching with the ripple of the water in the cup. I went back and watched this 3 times just to make sure I wasn't crazy and that maybe I wasn't being too nitpicky. If you or others think I'm still being nitpicky, that's fine. Okay? My question is, why do we have to hear the thump of the T-Rex coming so loudly in the sound mix when the whole point of the shot and the design is that the water ripples in the cup are indicating that something big is coming? It's so clearly there. It does get louder, but it's so clearly there. Why isn't the boy, why isn't the kid in this case, why isn't he and us through him, his point of view, seeing the ripple? And then we start to hear, I can't believe I'm questioning Spielberg as a filmmaker. I was surprised is all I'm saying, because in my memory, I thought it was all about the visual of the ripple, and it wasn't. Yeah. We hear the sound too.
It's what we remember. It's what people talk about. I mean, I have an answer. I don't know if it'll satisfy you. It's exactly something I noticed on this rewatch, and it is what I do think makes Spielberg as a suspense filmmaker distinct, and especially in light of the other Jurassic movies that would come after this one, it is patience. He has patience as a suspense filmmaker that few others have. And so if you break down this T-Rex approach, because I think it's all about until the attack. Once it attacks, I still find it thrilling. Sure, you could question, why does this happen? Would they really do this? There's that sort of stuff. But it's all the approach pre-attack where Spielberg's genius is on display. And it's because the patience he has to milk every moment. To me, the audio is part of that. I would suggest the thud we hear is chosen because movies are a visual medium. And so if you want to get every ounce out of this sequence, you start with only sound. And so think of all the steps Spielberg takes before we get the money shot, the full reveal of the T-Rex. First is the thud on the soundtrack. And, wouldn't that give them all the alert, put them on high alert right away? I don't know. If you need an excuse, there was a thunderstorm. Maybe it could be mistaken for thunder. Okay. We know it's not. Right. First thing you get, thud on the soundtrack. Then is the shot of the water shaking.
Okay. So I was thinking about them in unison.
Nope.
Seeing the ripple, we hear the sound, Josh. Now, maybe we do hear a sound before
that. Hear exactly. Yeah. The thud, we hear a thud before we see the glass. What do we get after the glass? We get the rear view mirror shaking. And this is just building. It's more. We're like, at this point, by the point of the glass, we want to see this dinosaur.
I get it.
We get the mirror. Then what do we get? We get a shot through the night goggles that the goat is gone. I mean, this is excruciating at this point. Then we get the goat's leg falling on the roof of a car.
I know. Yeah.
Then we get a shot of the claw on the electric fence. Then it comes. And then the money shot of the goat going down the dino's throat. So if you count the first element as that thud, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 suspenseful elements before the full monster is shown. To me, that is ingenious. It sets Spielberg apart from other action filmmakers who would cut that. If they cut that in half, they're still doing something special, to my mind, compared to most like monster creature features we might get.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with any part of that breakdown. I think I'm just suggesting, what if you just moved number 2 in that order to number 1?
Yeah, I think
you could still show that patience.
Yeah, it would be patient, but it goes back to that idea of like, again, movies being visual, so you start with sound. Starting with sound is always going to be a little more mysterious to me in a movie. There's something cloaked if you're just hearing it. So I have to think maybe that's why that was chosen. But it only extends from there to the action, the action blowout from that point when,
yes, of course,
it gets bigger and faster and louder.
Well, maybe a little bit disappointing too was the fact that he returns to the trick with Dr. Malcolm later in the mud puddle.
It's also the Jell-O being held up at one point too.
I knew it. I knew there were 3 instances of
that.
it.
I kind of like that it becomes a motif.
I was like, okay, yeah, motif or just kind of overdoing it a little bit. I definitely like the ripple in the water effect. So the second thing in terms of what makes this Spielbergian that I definitely would not have ever glommed onto when I saw this movie originally is that father figure element that now we so closely associate with Spielberg. Now, I'll say this part first. This for me is another weakness of the film in this part, that I'm not totally convinced that Hammond exudes enough terror concerning the fact that his grandchildren are out there. He's lost contact with them and they're almost certain to get devoured by a T-Rex. I know in that conversation, he says to Ellie, who better to get the children through Jurassic Park than a dinosaur expert? I know he's in a state of denial. I agree with you. Your read on that scene, it's guilt. It's there, but he is still shockingly calm throughout this entire sequence, considering what he has just put his grandchildren through. The entire emotional arc of the movie is really put on Grant. It's Sam Neill and how he evolves. Evolution is the word he himself puts on what he sees he and Ellie doing, but particularly him. From this guy who in the beginning of the film can't stand even the mention of the word kids, to then warm, compassionate father figure who is constantly hugging and protecting these children as if they were his own. It's about him coming to terms with being this father figure. And what does he not ever do? What does he not do that the lawyer, who's the only parent figure, right? The only adult in the car with them, what does he do? He abandons them, right? What is her phrase? Think about everything we know about Spielberg from his films and also from The Fabelmans. What does Lex repeat multiple times? 2 different times, and she says it multiple times. He left us. He left us. And what does Grant say? He did, but that's not what I'm going to do. He steps up to the plate and acts as a father figure and doesn't abandon them. And that then leads to that third part, and that part that is the most interesting to me, maybe, is the Spielberg choice.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. Are you saying this is something you newly admired, or you found it to be thin? Because to me, this has always been one of the more mechanical plot lines.
It's a little bit of both. I find that the emotional weight of it isn't really there.
Right.
I find it mostly to feel false. I find it interesting to talk about in terms of Spielberg as an auteur.
Sure.
So there's that. But I do ultimately find it a little bit weak. I find this one stronger or more compelling. This part makes me want to go back to Jurassic Park or talk about it more. The Spielberg choice. This notion of art or whatever you're obsessed with, your work versus family. And I alluded to this, right, when talking about Hammond and Spielberg in terms of the parallel or Spielberg's stand-ins. Hammond, and I noticed this, Josh, it's something I thought about when he starts to take them on the first tour, right? And he's showing off everything. He's the showman. He's like a director on a set, putting on a show. Everyone has to get in their places. He's responsible for all the departments. They all have to follow his vision. He wants to be responsible for every decision, every act of creation. And what does he want? He wants perfection. He wants ultimate control. And the problem is, of course, he lives in a human world where that type of control, that type of perfection is not allowed. And that takes us to that, or it's not possible. And that scene, again, that ice cream scene, he is all about thinking, well, all I have to do is do better the next time. I can control it better. And what does she say? You never had control. That's the illusion. It was all an illusion. Well, what else is an illusion, Josh? Filmmaking. Film is an illusion. It's fantasy. It's not real. And when she says to him that the only thing that matters now are the people we love, it's not the illusion. It's not the art. It's not the flickering light on the screen. It's the people we love. That's all that really matters. And I think you could maybe even, again, just humor me here. Okay. I'm not even saying necessarily that Spielberg's thinking about this stuff, but it's fun to think about. Take the analogy a little bit further. Even by 1993, maybe there was part of Spielberg that still saw himself as kind of the punk kid, upending the Hollywood order, making obsolete all the legendary directors that he revered. Go back to what Ian Malcolm says to Hammond when he is criticizing him for the decisions that he's made and what he's trying to do. He says, you stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could. And before you knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox. And now you're selling it. You're going to sell it. And then that line, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should. He's responsible for the blockbuster movie. He and his friends like George Lucas, all of that merchandise, Star Wars, it's about the figurines, whether they intended to do or not. And all the merchandise, it's all over the logos. Everything's Jurassic Park, right? All the merch that Hammond has everywhere. As we see, the camera pans across all the merch that's now not going to be sold before it gets to him sitting at that table, so forlornly eating that ice cream. And here's at least a case where the parallel is very clear. Again, whether it was in his mind or not. There is a line I came across, Josh, when I was looking something up, where they had a dinosaur supervisor named Phil Tippett working on the film, who is a longtime Hollywood guy, like a legendary guy, and
animator, right? Stop motion. Yeah.
And none of his stuff, or at least none of these models, his Go Motion models, were used in the film. And he saw some of the early work that was being done, the CGI stuff. Spielberg showed it to him, and guess what he said? I think I'm extinct. And Spielberg said, that's a great line. I'm going to put that in the movie. And of course, he put that in the movie. Dr. Grant saying, I think I'm extinct. So, there's that part of it. And even what you were saying about like hating inspections, hating the lawyers. Well, what filmmaker wants the suits to come around from the studio, right? Looking at what they're doing and questioning the choices they're making. And all of that seems still like something that I could very much see as part of that, his psyche as he's making this film and seeing the similarities between him and a Hammond-like figure. And I do think, Josh, to go back to your question about whether or not some of this works, to go back to Grant, when he makes his choice and what Spielberg has him do, right, is drop the claw. He drops the claw, which is his decision ultimately to show that he has accepted domesticity, and he has decided to put aside his dreams of only being on digs, right, and being the best scientist in the world or whatever it is, and he's now going to embrace being husband and father. I didn't buy it in this film. Did you?
No. And that's one critique I've long had that I think does still stand. Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about Spielberg. And, when I've written about Jurassic Park before, I talk about how these cars are on predetermined tracks. They're in the park. There's no drivers, right? That speaks to your point about control and how the movie does have a driver. It's Spielberg. And yet at the same time, the predetermined path to me speaks to why Jurassic Park is a little bit lesser of a film in his filmography, because it does feel just that predetermined in the themes, in some of the choices, in some of the characterizations. And that brings me back to the feeling of it being a little more mechanical than I would like from a Spielberg movie. I still do feel that way about it, even if I've come to appreciate it a little bit more. Also interesting what you're saying about the merchandising, because that jumped out at me too. And I was thinking, was this the first Spielberg movie that was merchandisable while it was being made?
Right.
So
in advance, they knew.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because E.T. definitely became merchandised with the lunch boxes and all that sort of stuff. But that was after the fact. Even Raiders, which at this point would have been, 13 years old and 3 sequels. Yes, Indiana Jones got merchandised, but probably that didn't happen till Temple of Doom, maybe, or shortly after Raiders came out. They weren't thinking about it, as you said, while they were making it. And here it is clear that they're selling Jurassic Park while they're selling Jurassic Park. And that's so there's a level of self-awareness at play that I don't think his other films had up until this point.
Self-awareness, or you could say perhaps hypocrisy too. That's perhaps why the satire,
and that's
or if
what
there
some
is any satire, isn't potent at all, because they're aware, they are self-aware that they're selling. And that's why even I don't think the opening scene, the opening sequence is that good, frankly. And one of the reasons I don't think it's that good is because it feels so sterile and artificial. It feels like it's done on a set. It doesn't have any of that kind of classic Spielberg authenticity to it. And everybody in it is wearing the exact same uniform with the exact same helmet. And it feels like they took figurines out of the plastic and the vessels out of the plastic and put them on a set and the models and brought them to life. That's how that scene feels to me. It feels so fake.
It's tricky. I agree. It's not as strong as it should be to open up with the movie, though it does make 2 good decisions. We don't see much of the monster, right?
Yep.
And also the touch of having the one guy who gets it being dragged up and down. I mean, I don't know if I agree with you that Jurassic Park is scarier than Jaws, but that is scary to have this guy. Why is he being dragged up and down? Why does that need to happen? It's just one of those, you inject inexplicable elements into a horror scene like that, and they become infinitely scarier because your mind is just I don't know what's going on here now. I want no part of it. I did like that touch, but could have been a stronger opening for a Spielberg monster movie for sure.
I mean, we can save it for another time, but Josh, that T-Rex sequence is 8 to 10 minutes long. And once that T-Rex starts tearing apart the truck with the kids inside, what competes with that in Jaws for prolonged terror?
Oh, prolonged is a good question, and you know what? It's not fair, because this goes back to when I saw Jaws, to your earlier point. It's the bone chills from Jaws, seen it as a kid, are so deeply embedded at this point.
Sure.
It's just, there's not going to be anything that's Jaws-like that's going to hit me that way.
Okay.
But I agree. It's it is a brilliantly sustained sequence. The patience that he takes to set it up pays off with the delivery, I think.
It doesn't matter, because the scariest thing in Jurassic Park is the lawyer wearing a suit with shorts.
Yeah, bad luck.
We can agree on that.
Bad luck.
He deserves to get eaten
just because of that.
Just for that. Can we agree?
Sure. Why not?
Jurassic Park is currently available on Peacock and VOD. We know you've seen it. So if you agree or disagree, and I feel like at least I'm going to get some emails. I love it. I want to hear why you love Jurassic Park.
Oh, you're going to hear it.
Please
You're
going
to hear it.
Feedback at filmspotting.net. Josh, that's our show.
You can find Adam, if you want to share your Jurassic Park thoughts, on Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd as Filmspotting. I'm at all those places as well. Blue Sky, too, as Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. You'll be able to listen early and ad-free. You'll also get a weekly newsletter, monthly bonus episodes, and access to the entire show archive. For show t-shirts and other merch, go to filmspotting.net/shop.
We actually have a July 4th sale going on right now at the Filmspotting shop. Hats, t-shirts, stickers, magnets, you name it. It's all there. Filmspotting.net/shop. In that Filmspotting archive, lots of Spielberg, Sacred Cows, including Jaws, episode 782, Close Encounters and Lincoln with Michael Phillips, episode 422. Raiders of the Lost Ark, an infamous episode in the show's history. I mean, now Jurassic Park, me hating on Jurassic Park, may replace it because Michael famously doesn't like Raiders much. That's episode 413. Top 5 Spielberg scenes, episode 379. And then there's other reviews going back to 2005's or ranging from 2005's War of the Worlds. That's episode 20 to 2022's The Fabelmans. That's episode 900. Gareth Edwards, who made Rebirth, well, the creator, we talked about that on 939, Rogue One 615, 2014's Godzilla 491. Streaming or available VOD now. Josh, The Old Guard 2 playing on Netflix. I actually really want to see this. We liked this movie, The Old Guard.
We did, and this is the first time hearing of the sequel.
Me too. Me too. It's the sequel to the 2020 film about a quartet of immortal warriors who protect humanity. Good news that Charlize Theron, and really good news that Kiki Lane is back, among others. Director Gina Prince Bythewood, not back. In limited release, you can see 40 Acres. This is a movie set in a famine-decimated near future about rural Black farmers struggling to safeguard their farm. So this seems pretty intense. Matt Neglia from The Next Best Picture says it's a gnarly post-apocalyptic survival thriller, and Danielle Deadwyler is no nonsense and tough as nails. Did you see that coming, Josh? I mean, she can do anything, but
yeah,
still.
I mean, after her performance in the piano lesson, she's definitely, a draw for whatever she's doing. And this setup sounds pretty good too. So I might have to catch up with 40 Acres.
Also being re-released in theaters, this is Spinal Tap. This was part of our 8 from 84 review, along with Stop Making Sense and Purple Rain. That was on episode 770
What a show.
of Filmspotting. Yeah, great show. And I'm just going to say this real quick. This past weekend, the band that I've been in since 7th grade had to get together because we had a show Saturday night in our hometown. And just in case you thought maybe Spinal Tap somehow still wasn't relevant to bands or wasn't a film that most people our age didn't still adore, we might have sat there Friday night at about 1 a.m. having a few beers and just watched a supercut of all the best lines and laughed our butts off, Josh.
So you do this after the show, not to get yourselves hyped up.
To get ready for the show.
Ready. That's what I was wondering. That makes more sense. Did it pay off? Did you guys kill?
We did okay, but we also did have some Spinal Tap-like moments on stage. It was fitting.
Well, see, this is what happens.
Well, it's really what happens when the performance is also your practice. Also out, you can see Video Heaven, a documentary about the era of the neighborhood video store from Alex Ross Perry. It's playing at Chicago's Davis Theater on Sunday, July 6th, with a post-screening discussion hosted by critic Ignati Vishnevetsky. In wide release, you can see Jurassic World Rebirth. Next week, it's our top 5 films of 2025 so far and our Pantheon Project review of The Apartment for its 65th anniversary.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Halgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at wbez.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Filmspotting is listener supported. Join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com and get access to ad-free episodes, monthly bonus shows, our weekly newsletter, and for the first time, all in one place, the entire Filmspotting archive going back to 2005. That's at filmspottingfamily.com.